Shalom and greetings to you all. Now, this will be unlike any Passover you've ever experienced, and as such, it'll actually be closer to the original than could ever have been imagined. We're not going to read your traditional haggah. In fact, I'll encourage you not to read at all. It is a designated biblical time to take stock and observe certain things. It comes on the heels of our having just spent 12 days determining the kind of year we want to have and putting our intention out to the universe to get the ball rolling and manifest our desires. We recognize the prayers that are done at any time are to both give thanks and to engage our totality in a sensual experience as deep as our core being so that we can understand the joy of unity. And especially this year, it's an opportunity to overcome feeling alone and understand it's in your hands to create community. We need to come together, reach out, connect, and form community. It connects hearts. It connects souls. So let's all come together now as we come together every week as a group of like-minded, like-souled fellows seeking unification of spirit. Remember, this is not in a religious sense, but as kind, caring human beings, which we all are, exhibiting the collective consciousness of seekers who come together in a showing of faith, of love, a community, a chavur, a fellowship, expressing our nature of kindness, compassion, thoughts, feelings, hopes, dreams, and wishes that unites all of us in this community house of spirit, Beth Ruach, sharing and bringing light and keeping fear at bay and joining together. So once again, please do go ahead and invite everybody, physically, psychically, emotionally, or spiritually, to gather and share. From Psalm 133, the Hine Matov, come together. Hine Matov. Shevet Achim Gaga. Hine Matov. Shevet Achim Gaga. How good, how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters together. Community. Together. So let's all spread love, goodwill, and fellowship to the world, which really needs it right now. Remember, friends, this is you're just setting aside just a little bit of sacred time in your sacred space to honor and converse with whoever, whatever you happen to believe in. We all believe in different things. It's part of your kavanah, your intention that you put out to the universe. It is your goodwill. Now, Passover is a time for the engagement of your senses. We eat, drink, and be merry. But, do some prayers at times. Really, they're really quite minimal. But do whatever you're comfortable with in whatever vein you like to do them and whatever faith you happen to follow. Give some thanks and engage all your senses because that's what you're doing when you pray. Light a candle for sight. Listen and tell the story, your story. Eat the food, drink the wine or juice for taste. Grab some spring flowers and engage your olfactory sense. Wash your hands. More important now than ever. Feel the touch of water as it cleanses you. These things are the things that we do every day that engage us in the keys to life. Light gives us strength and it shines a light on the fears that we carry. When seen in the light, our fears are not so daunting. Water, juice, wine, bread, or this week, the bread of the priest, unleavened bread, matzah. They're the sustenance that keeps us alive. We receive our blessings and the gifts of creation of life from God. So these little blessings is our turn to bless him, her, it, and to thank him. It allows us to exercise gratitude. Now, the story of Passover is inexorably connected to the biblical account of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, which is actually one of the most popular narratives from the ancient world. It has often been described as the theme of the Jewish festival of Passover. Pesach refers to God's instruction to the Israelites to mark their doors with the blood of a slaughtered lamb, so that the Lord would pass over them on his way to kill Egypt's firstborn. You know what? It's not a bad summary. I don't know who wrote it. It is inaccurate, and it contains an incorrect translation, but one we all continue to use. But it does contain the gist of things. You could perhaps better define the holiday as being the ritual of protection from death, the overcoming of bitterness, anger, and sadness in life, and joining the ranks of the holy. Now, I want you to remember that definition because we're going to be coming back to it. Now, on top of that, you also get to face and understand your fears. And that has a more personal meaning for many. And it can apply to anyone, anytime, because those are the things that we just carry with us and we can all feel them. Now, the event is captured in the Seder, which is simply a word that means order, but has taken on a greater meaning, like bread for food. And there are 15 steps to the order of the evening, during the course of which you will traditionally have all kinds of things. Any book or Wikipedia can list them. We're not going to do them, so I'm not going to go through them. Now, each of these are part of this 15-step dance that combines sights, sounds, smells, tastes, the sensations of our lives, in an evening dedicated to sensuality and to talk and to learn and to share and to inspire. Now, people spend so much time on the 15 steps, they too often miss the point. These steps were added over the years, and I often find they do more to take away than to enhance. Now, on this holiday, we traditionally read a book called the Haggadah. There are hundreds, if not thousands of them. And the opening of every Haggadah story is, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. That's the point. It's about breaking free of slavery. That's what the Exodus was about. Well, Haggadah is a word that means to tell. And it comes from Exodus 13:8. V'hagadah l'diber b'yom hahu, and you shall tell your son. Now, in the words of the Talmud, in every generation, a person is obligated to view themselves as if they personally left Egypt. That is you, and that is now. And in the Haggadah itself, it says, and even if we were all wise, all men of understanding, all elders, all knowledgeable of the Torah, it would be incumbent upon us to speak of the exodus from Egypt, to speak of freedom from constraint. That's what the point of the evening's about. The prayer said during the holiday refer to Passover as Zamein Harhutenu, the time of our freedom. Not the time of their freedom, but our freedom, your freedom. Make it current, make it personal. It's like the 10 Commandments at the Great Epiphany were spoken to the singular you, individually. You. This is about your individual freedom. It's not an evening of reading. It's an evening of storytelling and questions. Now, you may not get all the answers, but all questions are welcome. And of course, many of you are familiar with the famous 4 questions, usually assigned to the youngest participant, the Ma Nishtana. Why is this night different? Ma Nishtana. What is so different? Halayla Hazeh. On this night, Mikol Halelot, from all other nights, Ma Nishtana. Halayla Hazeh, Mikol Halelot, Halayla Hazeh. Well, the question for this year is, why is this year so different? Well, we all know the answer to that one. So we're not going to do the Seder you're used to doing. That's actually a late Second Temple version, which was added to much later. We're going to do it differently, and we're not just remembering long ago plagues, because this time we are actually living through one. A silent killer that we hope to keep at bay. And we do this not by congregating as we're used to, but by learning to do, each of us alone, with our own household and ancient ceremony, as we did originally. And I think you're going to want to do it this way every year. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, feline, or canine. The plague of death did not only go to Egyptian homes. There was actually no Jewish yet, and it struck any firstborn, regardless of affiliation. Those plagues tore through the land and wreaked devastation, destruction, and death. And around 1,400 years later, while it was celebrated every year, as we're commanded to do, it modified. And probably the second most famous Seder occurred, which was the Last Supper. And it has changed since then. And friends, you will now have the third most important Seder of all time, the one we're doing today. But first, let's all hop into our Wayback Machines. Set the date for the 15th of Nisan, approximately 1450 years before the Common Era. You're in your own home. Let's take a minute to put ourselves in sacred space by blessing God or whoever who blesses us all the time with the Baruch Hu, the call to prayer. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamevor Hamevor Baruch Adonai Hamevor Olam Va'ed. Blessed is God, who is blessed. Blessed is God, who's blessed. Now and forever and ever. Now, many are having virtual Seders this year. Now, most of those will follow the traditional Seder program, except you're going to take turns reading from different locations. That should be about the only major change. Now, you know what? There's rabbis who support it. There are rabbis who oppose it. The more Reform support, while the more Orthodox oppose. Hey, there's nothing new there. I believe in free choice, and you can each do what you prefer. Now, I would encourage you to take this special opportunity, which hopefully will never come your way again, to not join a virtual Seder, but to stay in and conduct your own the way that it was meant to be. Now, I don't want you to do the traditional 15-step Seder. This was the most important holiday of the year. It was about the Exodus, the story of freedom. This is relegated to a really small part of the traditional reading. Instead, we read about the martyred rabbis and 4 sons, and a lot of things that do not resonate with the purpose or with the participants. But you can change things. Like the 4 sons can become 4 children in today's day and age. You've got wise, wicked, simple, and indifferent, but you can make them the 4 aspects of man if you want. Like the riddle of the Sphinx, inquisitive in youth, following bad role models later, connected to the material world and unconnected spiritually, not having a desire to learn, and reaching a point where you don't follow tradition or care. That's how you take history and you make it relevant. The Exodus is to be your story of freedom. Pharaoh was the fear and constraint that you've taken with you and that you currently face. This is the time to set yourself free from fear, which is all self-generated. It's a projection of what did not happen or might happen onto the present and become free from your ego, which gets in the way of so much. And freedom is your ability to be you. So give some thought to a 3-part question, not thought to be one of the famous 4 questions, but what I'm going to ask you to think about. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What's stopping you? I want you to think about it, not just for now, but I want you to think about that for always. Now, the instructions for this holiday are really all laid out quite simply in Exodus 12:5, and then again from 12:18 to 26. We read them every year, and we bypass them completely. And the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first of the months of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, let them each take a lamb per house. And if the household will be too few for a lamb, then he and his neighbor, who is close to his house, will take it according to the count of persons, and it will be for you to watch over until the 14th day of the month. And all the community of the congregation of Israel will slaughter it between the 2 evenings. They will take hyssop and some of the blood and place it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel, on the houses in which they will eat it. And they will eat the meat in this night. They will eat it fire roasted with unleavened bread on bitter herbs. And you shall eat it like this: your hips clothed, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. And in Hebrew, that is Pesach Hu Adonai. And I shall pass through the land of Egypt in this night, and I shall strike every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human to animal, and I shall make judgments on all of the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord, and the blood will be as a sign for you on the houses in which you are. I shall see the blood, and I shall halt at you. There won't be a plague among you as a destroyer when I strike in the land of Egypt. And this day will become a commemoration for you. You shall celebrate it. A festival to the Lord. You shall celebrate it through your generations, an eternal law. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and you shall observe the unleavened bread, because in this very day I brought out your masses from the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day through your generations, an eternal law. Now that's the paragraph that had the poor translation in it. Pesach does not mean Passover. It never has. But it is the word we use. It means to halt, which was also there. God would see the blood and halt and change directions and move on. Passover just sounds better. And we get to imagine more of a cloud of death floating around. But there you have the actual menu and the instructions. Lamb, bitter herbs, unleavened bread. You mark your doorposts with hyssop and blood. You eat quickly. Be ready to go. That's it. There's no further instructions other than it is to be commemorated annually. And in the Torah, this holiday is not called Passover. It's called the Festival of Unleavened Bread, Matzah. It was private. It was household observations like you are doing now. Not large gatherings, not groups. This year we've been forced to recreate the original. Now, I know not too many of you are going to go slaughter a sheep and take its blood and some hyssop and mark your doorposts and lintels. Although it might not be a bad idea. You can leave out the slaughter of the lamb, but just use the lamb chop you have that holds the shank bone, dip it in the hyssop and use it to run along the doorpost. Now, why mark the doorpost with blood? Yes, blood was the first plague, and for good reason. Blood is the life force of man. Our energy, our spirit, our nefesh flows through the blood. It is also the one true thing you are always forbidden from consuming. See, the slaughter of an animal was the key part of the sacrifice ritual, and sacrifice was not about killing an animal, but about honoring life and connecting sacred ritual to life. Now, I know it sounds strange to talk of killing an animal as honoring the sacredness of life, but that's because we're so far removed from our food, but I'll leave that to another discussion. So we really just have a plate with 3 things on it: lamb, bitter herbs, matzah. Now, the lamb represents sacrifice. It represents the sacredness of life, blood, the connection to Abraham, and the near sacrifice of Isaac. The bitter herbs are about sadness, trouble, fear, but they can be consumed. They do not have to be consuming of us. And matzah, the bread of the priest, we are holy. The leaven in man is his ego. The egoless bread reminds us where we are in Dererum Natura, the nature of things. Now, you can also read these 3 things in terms of past, present, and future, because each food affects each tense. Lamb takes us back to the origins of our people, physically, spiritually. The horns of the altar, shofars and items of sanctuary, an animal with the perseverance ability of the present to survive, to move forward. Bitter herbs, the bitterness, the aspects of the past allow us to remember and honor history and what we've been through. And whatever bitter situation you go through now, we are reminded you will get through it. We cannot expect there never to be any bitter times again, but when they arise, we can overcome them as we have in the past. And the matzah, the festival we honor, the Exodus is a permanent reminder. Hurry and leave, a refrain we're used to, for showing us the road to freedom from whatever constrained us then and now, and to keep the faith, to keep the story alive as we were told to, and as we have for 3,500 years, and to remind us we were, are, and can strive to be a holy people, each of us individually, as we eat the egoless bread of the priest. So for a change, make this evening a haggah. Do not read. Tell the story. Our sages tell us we are to tell the story as if we were being freed from Egypt. We all are. We all have been. We all have constraints, restrictions, pharaohs in our lives, the fears which drain and steal our love of life. And this year, we have a plague working its way through our homes, randomly killing. Stop it like we did thousands of years ago. Friends, this is your opportunity with your family or with yourself. Tell your story. We all have overcome fear. Inspire those around you by telling them how you did it. And you can do so by still using the symbols you grew up with. I just did it by going through the 3 things we're supposed to eat. So put down the book and tell the story by looking at the Seder plate, the one you know. The entire history is right there. Now, any who have overcome fear and constraint, you all have, must help lead the others, must help others to see the path of freedom. And we do it with food, and we do it with questions. And the questions we're familiar with are, on all of the nights we do not dip even once. On this night, why do we dip twice? And of course, the twice is once we dip karpas, green vegetable, in salt water, and once we dip bitter herbs in harosa to sweeten them. On all other nights, we eat either bread or matzah. On this night, why only matzah? On all other nights, we eat herbs of any kind. On this night, why bitter herbs? The 4th question, on all other nights, we eat our meals in any manner. On this night, why do we sit around the table in a reclining position? Well, outside the 4th question, these all relate to the paragraph of the instructions from Exodus, which we read. The one that actually gives the instructions for the evening and lists the 3 foods. The 4th question, about reclining, was added in Roman times, and it kind of goes completely against it because you're told to eat hurriedly and ready to leave. So why would you be reclining? So that's a Roman question. And there are records which show that the original questions, the Manishtana, seem to have actually included only 3 questions. On all other nights, we do not dip herbs in any condiment. On this night, we dip them twice. On all other nights, we eat bread and matzah. On this night, only matzah. On all other nights, we eat all kinds of herbs. On this night, only bitter herbs. There are actually some even older records where the first question, that about dipping the herbs, was not asked. And in its place was the question about eating lamb fire roasted. So originally you had fire roasted lamb, matzah instead of bread and matzah, and not all kinds of herbs, only bitter herbs. And again, it relates to what we're instructed in Exodus. These 3 questions, they correspond more to the instructions given, and they correspond to the 3 main foods that are eaten at the Seder. The 3 which much be mentioned. The 3 we spoke of, the 3 which remind us of the definition of what this evening is actually about. And I gave you a definition of the evening before, and I said remembering. The ritual of protection from death, Abraham's sacrifice of the ram in place of Isaac, and the sacrifice we make as a family to commence the evening. The overcoming of bitterness, anger, and sadness in life. The bitter herbs, and in eating the bitter, my friends, it becomes sweet. And the joining the ranks of the holy, the matzah, the egoless bread that does not rise, the bread of the priest. If you were to use the modern, that is the Second Temple plate, the one you're used to, you could still tell the entire story because the entire story is contained in the Seder plate. Everything on it symbolizes an aspect of Exodus. So for those used to the modern plate, we'll use it. Okay? I wanted to give you the option of showing you the old plate with the 3 things, but here's the modern plate. Now the first thing on it is zroa, the roasted shank bone of the lamb. You know, the dominant sacrificial animal of the Torah. It reminds us of Abraham's sacrifice, or should I say, near sacrifice of Isaac, of our origins of shepherding, the career choice of our patriarchs and of Moses. Rashi viewed shepherding as the career choice of the intellectual. It took little effort and allowed plenty of time to think, and it evokes the Paschal lamb, which our forefathers offered to God and ate as the meal, which we eat on this night as our sacrifice, our exchange. Even though most people eat chicken, very few people eat lamb anymore. Beitza, boiled egg, whose roundness symbolizes the circle of life and death, the universal symbol from every society. You know, the world egg, the cosmic egg as we see in so many cultures, the primordial being comes into existence through hatching from the egg, such as Ra to the Egyptians, or rising from the primordial waters of earth like the Greek omphalos, the egg-shaped navel of the earth as honored at Delphi. Then we have carpus, the green vegetable. It's usually parsley, but if you have hyssop, use it. It is the first fruit of the season, in which we dip in the salt water to remind us of our tears and of the lintels and doorposts that we marked with blood. We have maror, usually horseradish. It's a bitter herb to remind us of the bitterness of Egyptian bondage and slavery, but it really signifies the bitterness of any confining situation when we feel overwhelmed. Right? The maror, or bitter herbs, remind us of Egyptian slavery, is a reminder that the name for Egypt in biblical times was Mitzrayim, the root of which, mem tzari resh, formed the word meitzir, which means to limit, to bind, to restrict. The things we do to ourselves to imprison ourselves in fear. And we eat the maror, not just to remind us of the bitter past, but because we can survive bitterness. From it comes the sweet taste of freedom and life. We are survivors. So please also take a moment to remember and to honor the victims of, as well as the survivors of the Holocaust. There is a danger in forgetting, in distancing ourselves too much. Their story of freedom is our story of freedom and must stand as a shining example of the indomitable spirit of man. We next have Haroseth, over here. It's a magical mixture of fruit and nuts and wine to remind us of the mortar which we used in making the pyramids. But of course the Israelites never did make the pyramids as slaves. So it couldn't represent the mortar of the pyramids, but it does represent mortar. It had a mystical formula comprised of the 3 roots and 7 fruits from the trees of the Garden of Eden, representing the tree of life, and as such it represents the mortar that holds the universe together. And that mortar, my friends, is love. And of course, the last item is the matzah, the bread of affliction and hurry, which did not rise because we left so quickly. And for those who know a little Hebrew, the root for command, good deed, and unleavened bread is the same. In one case, it is mitzvah, and in the other, it is matzah. And rather than see the matzah, the unleavened bread, as a bread of affliction, how appetizing is that as the name of a holy day? Instead, see it as the bread of holiness and the priest, and allow us to be priest-like for 7 days. It is unleavened, it does not rise. It is the bread without ego, which is the leavening agent of man. So from this plate, you can get so much about life and struggle and freedom. From the whole book, the part of the story that sticks the closest to Exodus is the reciting of the plagues. All the rest is filler. For many, the plague part's the favorite part of the evening. People love dipping their knives or fingers in the wine and splashing it on the plate as we recite the plagues to remind us how both our people and the Egyptians suffered. Everybody suffered under those plagues, as everybody is suffering now under this one. Now, the 10 plagues represent a lot of things. They counter creation, they reflect the tree of life, they reflect the 10 commandments. They're cosmic in scope. And on this night of questions, we have to ask ourselves whether these plagues may still be plaguing our lives. Now, we know one of them is very much alive right now, plaguing us and everyone in the world. But in any other year, by other events that happen to us, by things we do to others, by things we do to ourselves, this evening of questions, ask yourself, have you fought the plagues? Have you brought the plagues? Now, the answer to both is probably yes. So let's review the plagues of Egypt. Makot Mitzrayim. And for each plague, this is where people love to put a drop of wine on their plate. Blood. Dam. The life force of man. The one true forbidden food, his ki, his soul, his nefesh, his ruach, flows through the blood. Has my lifeblood been cut off? Has my energetic love of life and experience been curtailed? Have I cut off in others? Frogs. Svardeya. We all know when you touch a frog, you get a wart. What are the warts in my life? Lice. Keenum. Vermin. They may not kill you, but they are bloodsuckers. Are there bloodsuckers in your life? Where are you being a bloodsucker in another's? Beasts. Arov. It represents swarming creatures, often mistaken for a plague of animals, but really it's about gnats and other swarming things that interfere with the life of survival. In fact, this is actually one of the most dangerous plagues of all. In several instances in the Torah, we're told of the danger of swarming creatures. That is a warning, my friends, of the mob mentality. Are you part of a mob? Are you the target of a mob? The next one is pestilence, deve. Infectious disease, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Perhaps a member of the COVID family, a true harbinger of death. And a term that makes one cringe, like leprosy. It has social implications. And if you have it, you're an outcast. Are you an outcast? Do you cast out others? Boils, shechim. It's another disease, but one that is visible. Visible differences incubate discrimination. Do you discriminate? Are you discriminated against? Hail. Barad. And it hailed yesterday. Hard balls of ice and snow. Well, that doesn't sound so bad. After all, it's water, the birth of life, but is also a destroyer of crops. That means there's no food. It is unpredictable and brings devastation more often than not. This was burning hail, fire and water, two opposites which fight each other. Has hail held you back? Have you devastated another's life? Are you battling within yourself? Locusts, Arabe, another swarmy creature, 2 of them in 10 plagues. Well, that tells you something. The great danger of the swarming mass. And locusts, my friends, contribute nothing. They're the worst kind of natural disaster. There's some communities that are considered locusts because they feed off of what others produce and produce nothing of their own. They only bring devastation. Do you contribute and produce? Do you feed off others? Are there parasites in your life? Darkness. Hoshech. Probably it's the most prevalent. How many of us still live in darkness? Do you fear the light because it hurts your eyes? What can we each do to help bring more light to the world? Start by bringing it into your own life. And finally, we have the death of the firstborn. Makat Becharot. Death takes many forms, my friends. This year, we have the plague of death. It is around us. We cannot see it. But on another level, we all know people whose spirit has died. They go through the motions of life only. Sometimes it's because of hardship. Sometimes it's because their own spirits have been crushed, ridiculed, scorned. Where have I crushed another? Where have I been crushed? Where have I been encouraging? Where have I been encouraged? These are the plagues we each face every day of our lives, and we can each do something about every one of them. We can ensure they are not part of our lives. The Passover celebration commemorates an event which will probably symbolize for all time the essential meaning of freedom, namely freedom directed to a purpose. When Israel came forth from bondage, it was not simply to enjoy liberty, but to make liberty an instrument of service for everybody. Are you offering yourself in the service of others? These are the stories of freedom you should be telling. Your story is the story of freedom you should be telling. And you all have one. Each of you has felt the Pharaoh of your life has fought to free themselves from the constraint. You do not have to read from a book about things that do not tell the story. You can look at what lies in front of you and let the story tell itself. This is how you have your own Seder. This is how you honor what was put down in Exodus. It doesn't have to involve others, but it will again. And when it does, you can direct those around you to understand freedom and not to recite, but to share, to explain, to strive, to inculcate its meaning, and more importantly, to lead. But no matter what else, my friends, if you do nothing else, you've got to learn to have some fun, during this. What would you think if I gave you a tune to help you recall what we do? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and you'll know exactly when we're through. Boy, I get by with a little help from my friends. Boy, I get high with a little help from my friends. Boy, gonna try a little help from my friends. Now, I want you all to have a fantastic week, a week of egoless existence. Stay in, stay safe, and remember, this too shall pass. Shabbat shalom, blessings to you all. Enjoy the festival of unleavened bread. Thank you.